Who is your favorite Atlanta Braves player? That's what we're going to be discussing on today's podcast. I'm going to give you my top 10 all time favorite Atlanta Braves players. This is my list. This is not the best players of all time. This is just the players I enjoyed watching the most with the Atlanta Braves. So we're going to be breaking that down on today's podcast. Want to hear your favorite players as well.
Hey, this is Stacey Gotsoulias,
DC Lundberg,
Ryan Finkelstein,
Taylor Blake Ward,
host of Locked On Yankees,
Locked On Mariners,
Locked On Mets,
Locked On Angels,
and you're listening to Locked On Braves.
Locked On Braves,
Locked On Braves,
part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network, where we talk about your favorite teams every day. And here, obviously, we're talking about your Atlanta Braves. I am your host, Jake Mastriani. You can follow me on Twitter at ShortstopBall. Check out my bio there to see everywhere I am covering the game of baseball, including the Atlanta Braves in written form over at TomahawkTake.com. Also, please make sure that you subscribe to us on YouTube. We're really getting that subscriber count up, and I do appreciate it. Make sure that you follow the podcast on Twitter at LockedOn_Braves. Very important here to follow us and to comment as I try to make this an interactive show with you. Send in your questions, your suggestions for the show. I do really appreciate it. I got a backlog of questions that I promise you I'm going to get to after the Christmas break. So continue to send in any of those questions, anything you want to talk about on the podcast. I want to make this podcast your podcast. So continue to follow us on Twitter. Send in all the questions that you have for the podcast. And thank you, as always, for making Locked On Braves your first listen each and every day. Again, we continue to post episodes daily, 5 days a week, a Monday through Friday, here for you to get through this long, grueling off season that it just seems like it's only going to get worse before it gets better. So make sure that you are subscribed to the Locked On Braves podcast, wherever it is that you get your podcast. And as always, appreciate the support on the show. On today's podcast, I am going to be giving you my top 10 list of my favorite Atlanta Braves players of all times. Again, this is not the best Atlanta Braves players of all times. This is my favorite players. And, I am born in the late 80s, so I was there for that run in the 90s. But I'm going to be honest with you, obviously was pretty young during that time. So there's not a lot of players during those 1990s years that I really remember, players that I, not necessarily that I don't remember, but they weren't really players that I locked onto. This is going to be more so a list of players who have played for the Braves that I cheered for the hardest, the players that I wanted to see succeed more than anyone else on the team. So that's how I'm putting this list together. And I'm sure I'm going to forget some names. I kind of just tried to go off the top of my head here. I really didn't, do a lot of research or put even a ton of thought into it. And that was intentional because, I want this to be a list of players. When I think of the Atlanta Braves, players that I've enjoyed watching, who is that? Who comes to mind? Who's first that comes to mind? So that's how I put this list together. Again, I'm sure I'm going to exclude some players that I really enjoyed, exclude some players that I know you really have enjoyed over the years, but this is my top 10 list. And please let me know on Twitter at ShortstopBall at LockedOn_Braves who some of your favorite Braves players are of all time. And again, my fandom really kind of starts in the early 2000s. Again, I watched the Braves growing up in the 90s, but that was my 1 through 10 age years. So I didn't exactly have a player at that time. And just to give you a little bit of background of my fandom history, again, grew up watching the Braves. It was my mom's favorite team. They were on every night on TBS, just like many of you. But once I started playing baseball, once I got like 6, 7, 8 years old, I really started to focus more on individual players. And I had started playing shortstop at that time. And I fell in love with Ozzie Smith, who was just retiring about that same time. But I fell in love with Ozzie Smith. I loved shortstop position. I loved the defensive aspect of it. And you're going to see that in my rankings today for my favorite Braves players. So, I kind of locked on to a particular position. I was a big Ozzie Smith fan. He retired. I became a big Royce Clayton fan. So, during that time of my fandom, I was more so just a fan of a player, more so than a specific team. And then it really wasn't back until the 2000s that I started to really dive into the Braves again and really become a fan of the team and the players of the team. So when I'm giving out my top 10 list, you're not going to see, Dale Murphy, who I interviewed a couple of weeks ago. Love Dale Murphy. Please go back and check out that interview. Hank Aaron, who, obviously didn't get to watch play. So this is going to be pretty much from the 2000s on, really the last 20 years. And again, my top 10 players. So I'm going to jump right into it. Number 10 on here is probably going to catch a lot of you by surprise, but Matt Diaz has always been one of my favorite Braves players of all time. I love Matt Diaz. I think it was Joe Simpson that called him the hitting fool. It just seems like every time he came up, he got a hit. I mean, it was just truly amazing, but I also just loved his personality, loved him off the field, just loved him being that kind of guy that just got you a big hit. So Matt Diaz, one of my favorite players, played with the Braves from 2006 to 2012. And I looked at his slash line while he was with the Braves, and a lot of you may not recall this. I mean, he slashed 299, 347, 449 with a 796 OPS. So a very good hitter. Yes, he was mostly used as a platoon hitter, but the hitting fool he was. And I love Matt Diaz. One of my best memories of him is, I believe it was in Philadelphia, when a fan ran onto the field and Matt Diaz took him out with a leg check. And that was actually my profile photo for a long time. I loved that moment from him. So one of my all-time favorites, Matt Diaz. Coming at number 9 is probably a controversial one, but again, it goes into my love of shortstops, and that is Dansby Swanson. Look, I know Swanson is a controversial topic among Braves fans as far as, is he good? Is he not? I think that he is. I think he's undervalued because he was the number 1 overall pick and everybody expect him to be an all-star and MVP. But I think what Dansby Swanson brings you with a winning attitude, a winning culture, a winning type player. They just won a World Series with him playing shortstop, hitting nearly 30 home runs. So I love Dansby Swanson. I love what he brings you on the field as far as leadership. I love what he does off the field. Great in the community, great for the city of Atlanta. So I just love the personality. Again, one of the last games I went to, I saw Dansby Swanson, open up that door down the right field line and sign autographs for the kids. Just a really cool gesture during the time, obviously during a pandemic where a lot of players aren't doing that. And I thought that was really cool. So I love Dansby Swanson, certainly deserving to be in my top 10. Following along in the shortstop profile at number 8 is Rafael Furcal. And he's probably going to be on a lot of lists. I know he's a very popular player. I was actually sad to see that he was only with the Braves from 2000 2005. I thought he was there a little bit longer before he went to the Dodgers, but just what a really fun player he was. Just, a small guy, but was able to play shortstop and had a rocket of an arm. That's what I remember the most about Furcal, is just that rocket of an arm coming out of that little compact body. So one of the most fun players to watch growing up as a Braves fan. Again, played with the Braves from 2000 to 2005. Loved Rafael Furcal. I know a lot of other listeners out there and Braves fans love him as well. And then number 7 is Craig Kimbrel from 2010 to 2014. Again, I don't know. It seems like Kimbrel was there longer than that. I wish he was. I kind of wish he would come back now. I'm still trying to find ways to make that happen. But you all know, you watched the Braves baseball during that time when he came out of that gate at the bullpen, how exciting it was seeing that hunched over set that he has from the windup or from the stretch. It's an iconic look. I mean, he's one of the best closers of all time. He potentially could go into the Hall of Fame one day. Hopefully it's as a Brave, but one of my favorite players, and he's from Alabama, which is where I'm from. So I love Craig Kimbrel, just that iconic pose on the mound, the stuff that he brings. I mean, I think he had like a 1.47 ERA during his time in Atlanta. I mean, just one of the most dominant relief pitchers that we've ever seen. So I love Craig Kimbrell, still love him. Again, try and find a way to get him back to the Braves. So he comes in at number 7. So at number 10, I got Matt Diaz. Number 9, Dansby Swanson. Number 8, Rafael Furcal. And at number 7, I have Craig Kimbrell. All right. So coming up next, we'll do numbers 6 through 3. This holiday season, grab the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar or even better than a candy bar, and that is Built Bar, filled with so much holiday goodness, rich with decadent flavor, covered in chocolate, but amazingly low in calories, sugar, net carbs, and fat, and high in protein. You get the best of both worlds, delicious and healthy. So many flavors, you'll have a hard time choosing. We have the raspberry or mint brownie, cherry or double chocolate, cookies and cream, or peanut butter brownie. Built Bar gives you that extra fuel you need to bust down those mall doors and battle all the holiday shoppers. Or if you're just standing in endless shopping lines, Built Bar can give you that extra something to keep you going. So throw one in your jacket or purse. You never know when you're going to need it. And go to Built.com. Use our promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your order. Again, that's LOCKED15 at Built.com for 15% off your order. All right, continuing my countdown of my top 10 favorite Atlanta Braves players of all time, or really through my time, which is like the last 20 years. Coming in at number 6 is Chipper Jones, obviously an iconic player in Atlanta history. I mean, you could easily say one of the top 2-3 Braves players of all time. Was with the Braves from 1993 to 2012. His entire career, you all know Chipper Jones. You know how great he was for Atlanta, what he means for Atlanta, spending his entire Hall of Fame career in Atlanta. What I really remember the most about Chipper Jones, I don't remember what year it was. I remember him chasing 400 because I remember I was in college at Auburn and working at Byron's Barbecue, if anybody knows Byron's Barbecue in Auburn. And every night, me and my manager, Joe, there would be sitting. He'd let me know when Chipper came up as he was still batting 400, I think into, even late mid of the season. And so that was a fun thing for me to watch with Chipper. And then his last season, I didn't go to that last game, which I'm thankful I didn't, that dreadful wild card game. But me and my now wife, we weren't married at the time, went to all 3 games for his final homestand. And that was just an amazing series to watch. It was a lot of fun seeing Chipper in his last regular season home debut and just what he meant to the fans, what he meant to the city of Atlanta and the franchise. So got to put Chipper Jones in here. Coming in at number 5 is Ronald Acuna Jr. Ronald is one of those guys right now that when he comes up, I get so giddy, so excited. I want to see what he can do next. There's not a ton of players that really do that to that magnitude. It's him and Mike Trout, maybe Fernando Tatis Jr. right now that are guys who that once they come up to bat, you got to turn it on and see what they do. But not only that with Ronald, I mean, I love to see when he gets on first base, is he going to steal? I was a big advocate for him to go for the 40-40 or maybe even 50-50 season last year. I kind of think with the injuries that may be off the table in the future, but just such an exciting player. Then he's got that cannon in right field. So I love Ronald Acuna Jr. I think that's no surprise to any of you listening, but he's already in my top 5 of my favorite Braves players of all time. Coming in at number 4 is Jason Heyward. And again, Heyward, just a polarizing figure in Atlanta when he came up. Everybody was already putting him in the Hall of Fame. There was so much hype surrounding him. And I know he didn't exactly live up to that potential, but the excitement around him and just the good guy that he is, and him and Freddie being such good friends and seeing that relationship was, so cool. And it made you want to just cheer for Jason Heyward. Even when he left or got traded and signed with the Cubs, I still cheer for him. I want to see him do well, but also just a great memory of him. I was there for his debut, that game against the Cubs and Carlos Zambrano, and I was sitting there under the Gas South sign at Turner Field when he hit that home run, and it was one of the most electric moments I have ever heard, seen, felt in a ballpark or any kind of stadium. I've heard the only thing that kind of compares to it is that grand slam that Ronald Acuna Jr. hit in that Dodgers series a couple of years ago. But when he hit that home run off Carlos Zambrano, I mean, that place just erupted. It was absolutely incredible. If you were there, you know what I'm talking about. So right then, instantly just fell in love with Jason Heyward. Always been a big fan of his. Always will be. So I love Jason Heyward. And then at number 3 is Andruw Jones. And, I told you at the beginning, I'm a defensive player. That's what I loved doing growing up, became a shortstop, and loved playing defense, loved the defensive side of the game. Nobody did it better in center field than Andruw Jones. 10 straight Gold Gloves out there. Forget the offense for me. Just the defense alone should make him a Hall of Famer, in my opinion. Again, Ozzie Smith, who I told you was my favorite player growing up, if he's in the Hall of Fame strictly for defense, I don't understand why Andruw Jones isn't. Ozzie Smith, the greatest defensive shortstop of all time. Andruw Jones, in my opinion, the greatest defensive center fielder of all time, both two primary positions. Andruw Jones should be in the Hall of Fame, again, just strictly for his defense, but he also provided a lot of power, was a good hitter, was one of the best players in baseball for a decade. So I'll do another podcast going over Hall of Fames. I know there's a question out there on which Braves players should be in the Hall of Fame. Andruw Jones is certainly one of them, in my opinion, one of my favorite players of all time. My number 3 favorite player, as far as Braves players of all time to watch. Could just watch him all day, roam center field, make amazing catches. I love Andruw Jones. He's my 3rd favorite Braves player of all time. All right, next I want to do the top 2 and then give a couple of honorable mentions as well. BetOnline has you covered all season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. As football season continues the march to the playoffs, BetOnline remains your number 1 spot for all the sports action this season. Head to their new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use our promo code LOCKEDON to receive your bonus. From basketball, football, NHL, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, so just give you a quick rundown so far. We have at number 10, Matt Diaz. At number 9, Dansby Swanson. Number 8, Rafael Furcal. Number 7, Craig Kimbrell. Number 6, Chipper Jones. Number 5, Ronald Acuna Jr. At number 4, Jason Heyward. And at number 3, Andruw Jones. So that gets to our final 2 spots here. And again, these may be a little bit controversial. Maybe not number 2. I'll go ahead and tell you. At number 2 is Freddie Freeman. And that one's pretty obvious. You've been listening to the podcast this offseason. You know how much I love Freddie Freeman, how I desperately want the Braves to bring him back and make him an Atlanta Brave for life. Been with the Braves from 2010 to the present, and I hope into the future as well. I mean, I can't say enough about this guy, what he has done for the Braves on the field, going through a rebuild, taking them to a World Series, but also just what he means off the field, what he means to the city of Atlanta. Everybody loves him. Everybody in the league loves him. When your opponents and your opponents' fans say, how much they respect Freddie Freeman and how much they love watching him play. I mean, that tells you so much about the guy himself. So there's just so much that goes into loving Freddie Freeman, the player, both on the field and off the field. Just a great example of what a player should look like. So, I mean, it's an easy choice at number 2 for me to pick Freddie Freeman. Again, I hope he is a Brave for life. I hope he never puts on another uniform. So he comes in at number 2 for me. Number 1 is probably going to be a little bit controversial when you think about all the great Atlanta Braves players who have come through, and so many more that have done more with the Braves than who I'm going to pick at number 1 here. But for me, this is the player I rooted for the most, the player I followed the most after he left the Braves, and that is Andrelton Simmons. Again, I told you at the beginning, and I started off with that backstory for a reason. I grew up playing shortstop, wanted to be like Ozzie Smith, loved the defensive aspect of the game, loved the shortstop position. So Andrelton Simmons is clearly, easily my favorite Braves player of all time because he is one of the best defensive shortstops we've ever seen. And that's in the game history of baseball. Unfortunately, injuries have really plagued his career a little bit, but I mean, just watching the things that he was able to do with the Braves and even with the Angels, I mean, just incredible stuff. And I have a little bit of backstory with Andrelton Simmons. So I worked in minor league baseball for a year, worked with the Princeton Rays in the Appy League, where the Danville, I believe it was the Danville Braves at the time. That league no longer exists, unfortunately. But Andrelton Simmons played for the Danville Braves, and I can remember him coming to play us in Princeton. And obviously, I was a Braves fan, so I was watching the Braves team rather closely. And I just remember seeing Andrelton Simmons over there at shortstop, just picking balls, backhanding them in the hole, and just flicking them over the first base like it was nothing. And you could tell then there was something special about this kid, at least defensively, with just how easy he made it look. Because one of my favorite things to do as a baseball nerd is to watch the players come in and just practice and take infield and batting practice. Most fans, most people probably wouldn't enjoy that as much, but I could sit there and watch infield and batting practice all day and not even care about the game. So that's what I love to do the most when I worked in minor league baseball. So I would just sit there and watch Simba, take infield and just how quick and easy it was for him to transfer. It was a thing of beauty. So, for me being somebody who loves the shortstop position, loves the defensive side of things, I mean, there couldn't be a player that I love more than Andrelton Simmons. And, for Call is right there as well, but Simba's a little bit more closer as far as recollection. And again, having a little bit of history, watching him, when he first came up in the Appy League and just seeing him kind of develop and become, again, a Gold Glove caliber shortstop, one of the best defensive players I've ever seen. Instinct wise, arm, range, he has it all. He's a total package. So that's my favorite Braves player of all time. Wish he could have spent more time in an Atlanta uniform. Wish he could stay healthy. Wishing him all the best, and hopefully he's got some good years left in him. But that is my top 10. I know I'm forgetting a lot of really good, fun, and exciting players over the years that I'm just not thinking of. Again, I tried to just go off the top of my head because I wanted to be players that I just really first thought of when I thought about my love for the Braves and the players that I've enjoyed watching. Tim Hudson's another one I really enjoyed. John Smoltz I had on my list, and I dropped him off because I forgot about Andrew Jones and had to put Andrew in there, obviously. But love John Smoltz. Can remember being at Nippers in Auburn watching his 3,000th strikeout. So love John Smoltz, love Tim Hudson, obviously from Auburn. So those are two that were some honorable mentions for me. Again, I know I'm excluding some players. I know you're going to let me know about it. And please hit me up on Twitter. Let me know your favorite Braves players of all time. But that will do it for this episode of Locked On Braves. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at LockedOn_Braves. Follow me at ShortstopBall. Send me in your questions, any questions you have, anything you want discussed on the podcast. And please let me know who your favorite Braves players of all time are. And also make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast, wherever it is that you get your podcast. And we will talk to you next time.